Whoop. I am super happy today. Anybody who knows me knows my favorite Star Trek show is based in the Delta Quadrant. You know, that might make second favorite. I love the animated series.
I thought you loved Arex, the three-armed guy.
Yes, I don't undersell the animated series. So we're here to announce an animated series, Star Trek Adventures campaign book now.
Yeah, right.
It'll be the top seller ever.
I mean, I don't know how it would be the top seller ever, but I don't know. I think there's some closet TAS fans out there.
Yeah, I'm not a closet fan at all. I'm out there. I love TAS. It cracks me up. And I dream of one day animating my RPG group's cartoon episodes like that, because I think it would be easy once you do a couple, models. Then you're okay. Anyways, hi, everyone. I'm Michael Dismuke. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG, and also one of the bloggers on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for Star Trek Adventures RPG. And we're here with the amazing Jim Johnson. Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I'm Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game published by Modiphius Entertainment. I'm the co-host of this podcast, and I have not yet blogged on Continuing Mission because I just don't have time. I've got so many Star Trek Adventures projects on my plate right now. And sneak preview, I just submitted a whole bunch more for consideration to the powers that be at Modiphius, and all of them got approved. So next year is going to be super, super busy. There's going to be so much stuff coming out next year. Please, like I told you guys, I'm talking to the fans, and I shouldn't use guys anymore. I should use a more appropriate. I told you friends.
Y'all.
Gamers. I told y'all last year, 2 years ago, save your latinum. Like, seriously, please take my stuff. I mean, I know we're heading for a recession here in the United States, probably, but in as much as you possibly can, skip a coffee one day, save your latinum, because there's going to be so much cool Star Trek stuff coming out, Star Trek Adventure stuff coming out next year. I just can't wait to start getting into it. And anyway, so that's my life.
And for those who don't know, I mean, it's the ultimate compendiums. The more I go through these, we've been going through the books one by one, kind of talking about why they were made, the background, showing Easter eggs in them. And I am becoming more and more convinced that these are the ultimate books about Star Trek. They're not the technical manual. The technical manual stands on its own. I agree with that. That's an epic that was used and referred to for many years. But when it comes to understanding the Star Trek universe, I'm convinced that Modiphius has cornered the market on that, which makes me excited because today we get to talk about my favorite corner of the Milky Way galaxy, and that's the Delta Quadrant.
Yes,
which makes me happy. Jim, do you know this is our 35th episode, by the way?
35th. Gosh, it feels like it's been longer, but 35. That's good. That's more than what? Gosh, we've been at this almost 3/4 of a year now, I guess. Yeah. You've been on other blogs that we had before, Sure.
Star Trek, STA Engage, and other stuff. But this is since we committed to this, we've done 35 straight, and it took us that long to get here. It's been 70,000 light years to get us to the Delta Quadrant book.
Yeah, so, and we're still not out of content yet.
Exactly. So now talk to me, Delta Quadrant. For those who don't know what the heck that is, what's the Delta Quadrant?
So if you have not had the opportunity to watch any of Star Trek Voyager, get to it. Go watch it because it's more Star Trek. I don't want to say it's more great Star Trek, but there are some great moments. I think me personally, I liked Voyager, but I don't like to say but that often, but I think it was a concept that did not work for syndicated television. I think in the modern era of television, Voyager would be amazing. And they would be able to do things with Voyager that they couldn't do back in the day, because the thing that bugged me the most about Voyager, and I'll go on my soapbox, is that the ship looked pristine week after week after week. They had no star bases. They had no resources other than what they could pull together themselves. That ship should have been looking worn and torn and more like Battlestar Galactica week after week, getting a little more worn down. people getting out of their uniforms, looking a little ragtag, changing up the appearances and stuff. I think it just the nature of syndicated television that Voyager had to deal with, just because that's the way the business was at the time, did their concept no service. Right.
Because you missed the point, though. You missed the point that the reason they didn't look ragtag and the reason the ship was so pristine is because they had the baddest captain ever, Captain Janeway. That's how good she is.
Okay.
She kept them tip-top shape, and she was not going to. And then when things started to get a little ragtag, they brought on, of course, 7 of 9, the Queen of Efficiency. And and would you really, as an engineer, ever talk back to Lieutenant Torres? No, you're going to do what she says. So she had them working like Klingons, scrubbing that hole.
Sure.
Whatever. So I'm going to.
Okay, that's fair. You know what? And now that I think about it, I've been on a behind the scenes on the rare occasions I actually get time to read. I've been on a huge Age of Sail, Horatio Hornblower, Alexander Kent, run here, reading a lot of nautical fiction. And those captains were literally out in the middle of nowhere on their own, maintaining their ship Bristol fashion. And I will admit that I never really got that from Janeway. I never got that kind of Hornblower kind of like, we are strictly Starfleet and we're going to be, ship shape and
she had Tuvok for that. She had Tuvok for that. She had Tuvok.
Yeah. So
I compassionate, motherly, like we got to all get through this. And then Tuvok was behind there slapping people, knocking people out in the decks. Anyways,
so long story short, Delta Quadrant book, all about the Delta Quadrant. Voyager spent almost all their time in the Delta Quadrant. So all the crazy, interesting species, things and stuff that they encountered in the Delta Quadrant, we put as much of it into this book as we could.
Yeah, and as excited as Jim was for the Gamma Quadrant last week, because he's all about Deep Space Nine, you're going to see my enthusiasm for the Delta Quadrant book this week. And let's open up with the inset pages. I mean, right here alone, Jim, once I got this book, I sat down with the inset pages, which maps the homebound path of USS Voyager over the 7 years that we had the privilege of having them on TV. And I was now able to visually watch each episode and see as they progress. Whose idea was this? This was, when I first got the book and opened it up, I was so excited.
So Richard Gale was the layout designer for this book. And he and I, as we were getting ready to start laying out this thing, we were throwing concepts back and forth. And he said, one of the things I really liked about the star charts that Jeffrey Mandel put together ages ago in that book called Star Charts was there's a series of maps in that book that chart Voyager's progress through the Delta Quadrant over the course of the series. And I thought, he and I think it was mostly him, but we both talked about it and we agreed, wouldn't it be nice if we could come up with some way to like take those maps and adapt them and put them in the book somehow, some way. And I was like, if given our compressed time schedule to get this stupid book done, if there's a way that you think you can pull that together, because it would all have to be hand drawn and it would all have to be hand done. We didn't have these assets just sitting on, Paramount's library or anything. I said, Richard, if you think you can get it done in the time that we need it done, by all means, knock yourself out, because he's a big Star Trek fan. And I think he delivered in spades. Like he took the Jeffrey Mandel maps that were in Star Charts and then adapted them for our purposes into the end papers. And I think they're great. I think they look great.
Excellent. Again, how Star Charts are great, but what you miss with Star Charts is the canon story. And so now this is the only book I can think of out there on the market that has the charts with all of the background that we're going to review today. So I still think I'm claiming again, this is the ultimate Voyager book out of everything that's ever been put out there, which is pretty impressive for a game, right?
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. And then last note that you may have noticed, you may not have noticed, but Richard and Mihao, who are two of the full-time designers over at Modiphius, who both worked on a lot of the early Star Trek books. For this book, they did have a powwow, and actually I shouldn't say that, should I? That's inappropriate, and I apologize. They had a conversation during the development of this book, and they decided to refresh the color palette just a little bit and bring it more in line with Voyager, moving away from Next Gen through the movies and then into Voyager. There are subtle changes to the LCARS color palette that Voyager enjoys on their screens as opposed to Next Gen. So it's more tans and different shades of blue, and getting away from some of the oranges and the yellows that were in Next Gen. So as you're flipping through this book, if you flip through this book compared to like the the Beta Quadrant book, you'll see some subtle differences in the color palette, which I think for this book looked great. And if I remember right, I think we used this color palette in Shackleton. I'd have to go back and look, because the Shackleton book moved through the timeline a little bit, but I'd have to go back and look. Yeah. Anyway, so for those who are paying attention to the graphic design and the color palettes, this is a fresh look.
We do. The Intrepid class is my favorite class of ship. Also, it's cozier than the Galaxy. If I was in space, I would actually rather be on an Intrepid class than a Galaxy. Yeah. For several reasons. Going again, just one more piece of art before we bust into the introduction, and that's the Borg tactical cube analysis. If you're a GM and you want to, have your group encounter a Borg ship, throwing this up on screen is definitely going to scare them, as they see this pop up on their main screen. So some beautiful artwork again that just immerses you in the Delta Quadrant and USS Voyager, who of course had probably the most contact with the Borg than compared to any other TV show we ever saw. Yeah, maybe second. Yeah, right. Cool. And again, stellar art. I'm cracking up. You commissioned art on page 5, where the Borg are actually assimilating one of the species that was a season 1 species. I forget their name now, but again, just immersing us in there. I want to ask you as we get into this, actually, Jim, too. Say someone's not playing the crew of US Voyager. What benefit is there going to be to having the Delta Quadrant book? Because that's 70,000 light years away. What was the idea behind this, unless everyone plays the Voyager?
Well, it's an opportunity to show off a lot of stuff that you wouldn't normally see in the Alpha or Beta Quadrant. Given the transwarp corridors and just Star Trek technology in general, there's possibilities that all this stuff could appear in your game or in a timeline or something, right? I mean, the Voyager really went in a lot of interesting different directions in terms of like technology and science and weird phenomena and just different stuff to throw at you, and really expanded the Star Trek universe, I think, in a way that you haven't seen before in like the original series or Next Gen or DS9. And I think, almost as more of a toolkit, a GM could take the Delta Quadrant book and like just pull the cool stuff that they want to use out of it, reskin it, and drop it right into your campaign. And like your players probably wouldn't know any better. Of course, this is also very Borg heavy. So if you're a big fan of the Borg, like this is the book to get, because there's so many ships and NPCs and stuff that you can throw at your player characters. And, I think the Borg in this book are rightly portrayed as terrifying, because they are really super terrifying, especially in Next Gen. I think, in my opinion, Next Gen really made the Borg, like that whole body horror, super scary. Like there's nothing stopping these people. And I mean, what are these things? And I mean, what do they do in Next Gen? They assimilated Picard, right? Like you wouldn't expect that. And like, oh my gosh, these guys are like super dangerous. So I think there's a lot of content here that you probably just dropped into your game.
I think also it's important for those who are fans of the novels to realize that in the novels, the USS Aventine under Esri Dax gets quantum slipstream drive, and they head back into the Delta Quadrant. So this is great second contact mission kind of stuff, like lower decks level. If you get a lower deck ship with quantum slipstream drive going back to make a second contact with all of these species, you have really good background here. And I like playing Where Are They Now? And we're going to talk about that when we get to some of the species, actually, because I have my favorites in here that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and that actually raises a good point, Michael. Now that we are, we didn't know when this book was coming out, but now that Picard Season 2 has come out, we know now that some of the new space frames in Picard Season 2 are, especially the Stargazer, they specifically mention on screen that some of the new technologies in the newer Starfleet ships are based on Borg technology that Voyager brought back from the Delta Quadrant. So
which was the stupidest thing they could have done.
Yeah. So now a game master, like you could look at this book and just cherry pick some of the cool Borg stuff out of here, drop it right into your post-Picard era. Like if you're doing an early 20th century game, you could just drop that technology right into your Starfleet ship And then all kinds of shenanigans can ensue.
Right. Let me take this Borg tip. It's going to be harmless. Let's just attach it here. I mean, talk about bad ideas.
Yeah. Oh, our bioneural gel packs are now infected by Borg nanites, and now the Borg are just going to spread all throughout the ship. And okay, now what? That wasn't the best idea we ever had, but now what?
It's like lead lining your cuts. It's like, really? This is going to get you later. This is really going to get you later.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into chapter 2 and dig into the Delta Quadrant. Again, it starts highlighting many of the Imperiums and many of the governments, many of the planets that they ran into. Again, I'm going to say, we're not going to go into deep detail on this, but when it comes to second contact missions, where are they now? You could go ahead as a GM and read this section and say, okay, how did this interaction with Voyager affect them? And how's that going to affect my next contact with them? So some brilliant background information in here about them. Some of my favorites that are in here are the Hirogen. I know some people don't like the Kazon. I actually like the Kazon from a factional point of view. They're kind of very interesting. They have bad hair. I can't get over that. Of course, I have some hair product suggestions for them, but other than that, those were my favorite. And then the one that is my definitive favorite, where I got satisfied in Picard, though heartbroken, was the Sicarians, who you could transport 40,000 light years by standing on that pad, and they refused to give Voyager their technology. And as we know from Star Trek Picard, they got assimilated, which breaks my heart because that was a beautiful paradise planet. So that was, some of the species we see here. How about you? You have any favorites?
I honestly can't say I have a favorite in here, mostly because, no offense, I was not as big of a Voyager fan as you are. So I watched the series. I enjoyed it. I appreciated it, but none of the species grabbed me quite like DS9 or Next Gen did. I think what I appreciated about these write-ups, especially as the writers were delivering them, was that it just gave me ideas on world building, right? Like on how to create a very different, interesting alien species or their world or their setting or whatever, and how to spin that into something different, like the physiology on the swarm and just some of the other stuff that we dropped in here, or that the writers dropped into the show.
As we know now, it's canon is that Janeway and her crew made more first contact than any other captain.
Yeah.
Come on, that's a claim to fame. Come on.
I mean, it's cool. It's very cool.
Come on. All right. on page 20, I'm loving on her. So on page 24, I have to say too, another thing about that I like about Voyager, and Jim, push back on me if I'm wrong, I think they had the most interesting scientific anomaly concepts than any other show. They had, and the words they would use, like trimectic fractures, chaotic space, underspace, subspace sandbars. I think they really pushed the physics, the fluidic space. Don't you think that they probably were the one that pushed those kind of concepts the most?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things I remember, when it was first on air, I watched season 1 and season 2 really, really closely. Like I was really engrossed in the show because at that point DS9 was nearing the end of its run, and I was still hardcore Star Trek. Watching Voyager, I was taping it every week, on the VHS tapes, trying to cram as many episodes onto one tape as I could. And one of the things I remember appreciating about especially the first season, the first 2 seasons, I guess, was how very heavily into the science they were. And I think that's partly because Janeway was a scientist herself, right? So they gave her a lot of dialogue, a lot of science dialogue, which is great. So, I don't know enough about science to know whether it was like real science or quasi-science or, the traditional Trek, technobabble. But it felt more sciencey than especially DS9, because like at that point, DS9 was deep into the Dominion War and was going a very different direction, which is fine. But for those who are looking for the weekly science hit that maybe the original series kind of brought in quite a bit, Voyager was really delivering that. And like some of those early episodes, like Cathexis and I don't even remember the titles, but there was a string of first season episodes that were like science. And I was really enjoying it because I was like, wow, this is different and cool, because it was hitting my sense of wonder button in a different way than DS9 was at the time. So yeah, I agree with you that they must have had some good science advisors on the show at the time. I don't remember. I think Andre Bormanis was one of the science advisors at the time, but yeah, a lot of good stuff in there.
Yeah, one of the biggest lessons I learned from them in writing Star Trek was their use of, they're going into this deep science, but at the same time, they would always, and usually they use Tom Paris to do it, they would always create an illustration or a really, they would simplify the science verbally. So you're like, oh yeah, that makes totally sense. Yeah. Subspace sandbar, we're stuck on. Oh, okay.
Okay, we get it. Yeah.
And so I really like that the show did that because it taught me and GMs pay attention. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and get as crazy as you want with the science, but pair it with some sort of common analogy or illustration so that all your players around the table can go, okay, I get it. Okay. Yeah. It's like a budding cactus. Oh, okay. Okay. So in that case, we have to watch out for the subspace spikes. Okay. It gives them that kind of vision. So Voyager did great for that, I think.
It's a very careful balancing act of talking down to your audience without sounding like you're talking down to your audience, right? It's like you present this highfalutin sci-fi concept with the big words, and then you have some character go, well, what does that mean? And then they dumb it down. Not to say dumb it down in a bad way, but they simplify it so that everybody gets it. So that your average, your fifth grade average level intelligence person watching the show will get it, right? They may not understand all the technobabble, but then you say it's a space cactus with spikes that we have to watch out for. It's like, okay, I can get that. I can get behind that. I understand.
How do you get past the needles? We got to somehow pluck the needles with our deflector thing.
Yeah, there you go.
Pull the needle. Yeah, exactly. All right. So you, after you read this book too, I'll say this book doesn't carry all the analogies. Watch the show to get all the analogies, and it'll be a lesson on how to, for lack of a better word, dumb things down. All right, cool. We're again, you talked about how heavy it is in the Borg side in chapter 2. I mean, there's page after page after page. And one of the subheadings that caught my attention was resisting a force of nature. What do you think players need to understand when they're facing off against the Borg?
I mean, the challenging thing about the Borg, right? Like, and I know that there's a subset of players that are like, and I don't mean this in a negative sense. Like, please don't send me hate mail. But like, there's a group of there's a mindset of certain players that are in that D&D mentality of where if it has stats, we can kill it, right? We can beat it. If it has statistics, we can beat it, right? Of course, the Borg have statistics in the game because like you got to have statistics. But like, really, you don't want to fight the Borg. They will destroy you. They are not there to play nice. They are there to assimilate you. They want to take everything that you are and everything that you have and absorb it into their consciousness. They're not going to do things halfway. They're either going to assimilate you or they're going to destroy you. And that is the mindset. Like, you can't negotiate with the Borg. You can't like do things halfway. And it's like to say that they're a force of nature, like they really truly are or should be. In an ideal world, they should be a force of nature where you see the Borg, you're like, okay, time to go.
Yeah, you're not negotiating with a hurricane. Yeah. You're not negotiating with a hurricane. That's how they should be treated in the game. Mm-hmm. Is like that. You can try to survive it, but you're not stopping it.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And I thought, again, we can go into how well Janeway just got into diplomacy, hardcore diplomacy, in order to survive those situations. It does give you tactics in here, though. So I think if I honestly have never done a board game because I'm scared to. I'm scared to introduce the Borg into my game. But if you had to, there's actually almost what I would consider a report that you can give your players on how to deal with the Borg. Mm-hmm. And so this could be protocol based off of Janeway's experiences, TNG experiences with it. So it's kind of really fun. But if your players aren't scared, then you haven't done a good job playing the Borg. Representing them. All right, cool. Again, there's so much in here about the Borg, and it even talks about Borg locations. So I'll pass that up because, like I said, this is the preeminent book about the Borg. I can't think of on the market if there is even one that breaks it down to this detail. I've never seen it. I've never walked in a store at Barnes and Nobles. There's been Voyager books for sure. I have them, but I've never seen a Voyager book that broke down Borg culture like this.
Yeah, and I'm looking at my bookshelf. The only thing I can think of is if Hero Collector, I think, did they do a dedicated volume on the Borg?
I have. So I have the Star Trek Voyager Illustrated Handbook.
Yeah.
And though it breaks down different ships and decks and rooms and stuff like that, there's not 10 pages on the Borg. I mean, there's 2 pages on Borg enhancements that I'm looking at the book right here. But when I read this book, when I got this book, I was like, this is the ultimate Borg culture book. So even if you're not into playing RPG, but you want Star Trek history, Star Trek Voyager history, I would still read this book.
I think you're right, Michael. I think this might be the ultimate Borg book. So, but I know you want to kind of skip over this chapter 2.4 about Borg locations. I do want to note though that if I remember right, I think Aaron Palea wrote a lot of this. Okay. And what's really nice in here is not necessarily just about Borg stuff, but it's about terrestrial worlds and gaseous planets and demon worlds and asteroid stuff. There's a lot of world building and science in here that you could easily pull out of here and de-Borgify it and drop it into your campaign. Like if you want to have some interesting things going on with like asteroids and compiling asteroids and pulling asteroids together, because like other cultures probably do the same kind of stuff the Borg do on a different scale and for different reasons. But you could still easily pull all this stuff into a different campaign and have interesting things to do with it. But he just, or if it wasn't him, the writer of this chapter did a great job adding a lot of interesting detail about how at least the Borg approach terraforming and gathering resources for their own purposes that you could apply to a lot of different cultures and species and make your own and just have your players be terrified of things that they just can't stop.
Yeah, Delta Quadrant really was a different realm of space. Again, I think you know how I feel about the Prime Directive. I'm not a big fan of it. And so it was fun to see a part of the galaxy that wasn't affected by it.
Yeah.
And then Janeway's still sticking to her guns on trying to keep to the Prime Directive. So this is a harsh area of space. And we've talked before about playing vigilante games or playing games with other polities. Yeah. This game, you could, especially if you're not into Voyager, you didn't watch it, but you're like, hey, I need a world build. You can totally grab this and smack it on top and make that your area of the galaxy, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, similar to almost the Shackleton Expanse, same thing.
In a lot of respects, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And we know that is the Shackleton Expanse between the Beta Quadrant and the Delta Quadrant in a sense?
Well, it's in the kind of northeast corner of the Beta Quadrant, right? So it's on the way to the. Certainly, it's kind of a. I'm sure there's some people in Starfleet Command who are like, well, the Shackleton Expanse is kind of a buffer between us and the Borg. So let's be careful because you got the Federation down here, and then you got the Shackleton Expanse, and then you got the Delta Quadrant all up in here, right? So it could be seen as kind of a buffer. I mean, of course, space is big, right? You could go over or around it or whatever. But yeah, in fact, I think we even dropped in some Easter eggs in the Shackleton book that at certain time frames, the Federation didn't know. Maybe the Borg were coming out of the Shackleton Expanse. Maybe there's a transwarp corridor somewhere within the Expanse, that the Vinchari are aware of, or the Calmiran are aware of, or something. And
I got to ask who would win a battle between the Tilakal and the Assessors and the Borg. I mean, you got planet movers versus simulators,
and just imagine the fun when the Borg, or if the Borg were to assimilate the Tilakal, and or an Assessor.
Yeah, but the Tilakal have non-corporeal forms. Can the Borg assimilate non-corporeal forms?
Well, Assessor Tredic wasn't non-corporeal. He was fully corporeal.
Yeah, but he was telekinetic. You can't hit him with the little thingy thing.
Can you?
Telekinetic shield.
I don't know. There's some story potential there.
Oh my goodness. I hope someone's listening to this who hasn't yet played the Shackleton campaign, and you grab the Delta Quadrant and the Shackleton, you put them together and you make some amazing stories. Because that would be, now all of a sudden, even though I don't like them, this is my gaming group, even though we made the Tilakal enemies, you may have to broker a truce if the Borg are trying to make a major invasion using the Shackleton Expanse as a pass-through.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, a lot of questions, and that's the fun thing. I mean, honestly, we talked about this before, but we're 6 years into this game line now, and now we're at the point where we can mix and match and take different books and combine them together in different ways that we couldn't have even imagined 3 years ago when we were doing this book. So now you take the Delta Quadrant book and you add it to the Shackleton book. So what happens if the Borg were to try to assimilate the Calmiran or the Vinchari or
the Tilakal technology, the world moving technology? Oh,
Or heavens forbid, what if the Borg were to try to assimilate the Ko-Ferrari?
Oh, right? Lord!
The Ko-Ferrari. Now, granted, they are low tech, but their brains are so smart. Like you take all that incredible intelligence and their ability to project amazing technology, and then they just choose not to build it. But then the Borg assimilate them, and they're like, oh, look at all these new ideas. And then, of course, the Borg just get even more dangerous.
That's a scary idea.
Yeah,
that's scarier than Borgs assimilating tribbles.
Yeah, it's messed up.
Okay, that's fearsome. And for all of you who don't know what we're talking about, when we say Quifari and Vinchari and Calmirans, that's the Shackleton Expanse campaign guide, which is a world unto itself. So that's what
which introduces a whole bunch of new species, which segues us right into the next chapter of this book, which presents a whole bunch of Delta Quadrant species, which are very different, very interesting because they're all from the Delta Quadrant. So you normally would not see them in a traditional Alpha Beta Quadrant Starfleet kind of game. But I put them in here because I thought, oh, these would be really interesting, cool, and player characters or non-player characters to play, especially if you're going for that kind of Neelix, Kess, Quark, Odo, Kira perspective where you've got a Starfleet crew, but then you've got some unique characters too that kind of like, can kind of back and forth. Or if you're doing an independent game of a whole bunch of characters from the Delta Quadrant, all kinds of different species all mixed together, kind of like almost like a Prodigy, right? Where you've got, completely different species all just kind of mixed together into the same ship. This is an opportunity to showcase some of those species that were really kind of cool in Voyager that may not have gotten a lot of love, but now you could go make yourself an Ankari player character or a G or a Lokiram, like all those fun species that we see on the show.
We talked last week, remember? Last week we talked about the Picard pack, and we talked about like how can you play the Picard pack? It's in the future if you're in 2378, and then we said, well, wait a second. Hugh was a liberated Borg, which you cover in this chapter on page 64. And what if, as a liberated Borg, he on his way back to the Alpha Quadrant was liberating a G or an Ankari, and so you could actually bring his story into an earlier setting game with these characters.
Yep.
Oh, so you can mix the Picard pack with this too that just came out. Yep. Kind of cool. And I love on page 65 you list Borg implants. So Borg, there's a slew of Borg implants that you could use as talents, and swap out talents for some of these, and it gives you what the bonuses are. So this came out. This is the official guide on XBs. I know we do XB stuff later, but this is
good point.
this is the ultimate. Before even XBs showed up in Picard, you had already done XBs.
Yeah, but before we even knew Picard was coming out, I don't think we knew Picard. Well, I think we knew Picard was coming, but we had no idea what was going to happen. Like we had no idea Seven was going to be in it. I don't think.
And you did, and yet there's 2 pages here on liberated Borg.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Just happy accident. I will take 0 credit because there's no credit due there. It was just a happy accident.
That is so cool because what's funny, on continuing missions, we had plenty of people asking the minute Picard came out about XP stuff, and people started throwing into the blog. And I had completely forgot this was there. I'm glad I forgot because otherwise I would not have put content in continuing mission about it because I'm like, why do it again? Yeah, we try to do fan-made content.
If I remember, I think Hugh is in here. I think we got Hugh in here. As an NPC later in one of the later chapters. I think we got Hugh in here. I have to go back. I mean, we'll get there, I'm sure. But
okay, anyway. So there's some gold in here. I mean, I'm looking through here and getting nostalgic about the Lacorum and the Mari and all these other great characters.
Yeah,
the Monians, which were underwater, and Tom Paris rebelled against Janeway to help them out. The Akampa, and again, the ones that break my heart, the Sicarians.
Yeah.
Are all in here. So great species, great art too.
Yeah, as far as art goes, I want to highlight because I can't help it. I want to highlight page 75. There's a very very nice piece of art here that was one of those many middle of the night bits of inspiration as I was working on the art briefs. Because like I said before on other chat or in other episodes, I tend to, I work my day job and then I do a lot of Star Trek adventures at night after my son's gone to sleep. And this was just one of those late night inspirations. I was watching, I had original series on in the background and I was writing art briefs for this book. And I was like, oh, I need some more art briefs. What I think I don't remember the title of the episode. It was the episode where Spock is holding a dog, and the dog's very clearly in a costume, and it looks like a unicorn dog, and it's very cute and fluffy and cozy. And I was like, oh man, what would that thing look like if it was assimilated? And I was like, oh hell, why not? So I went ahead and wrote the art brief. We did a draft of the art. I sent it over to Paramount, and just to see if they would go for it. And I got some very favorable comments from our reviewer at Paramount. Right. And I was like, okay, it's in the book. Mission accomplished.
Very cool. Very cool.
So this is me having a little bit of fun.
My question, they always say that you have something unique that you will add to us. So it must have been the sense of smell. That's the only thing I could guess why they would want to assimilate this dog.
I don't know. Why would the Borg do anything? Right? Who knows? Right. There must have been something about those unicorn dogs that made them decide, oh, we should assimilate that thing. And by gosh, they did.
Yeah. And I'm gonna go ahead and encourage people, because there's so many non-alpha, beta, gamma quadrant species in here. If you're looking for additional traits and getting creative and building characters, and you're like, well, I want something nobody else has. This is a wealth of information. I guarantee you, if you steal some of these traits and rename them, no one will know where you got them from. So it's a whole hodgepodge of great traits that you could traits and talents you could pull in from this book. All right, Starships. Yeah,
Starship. This was me telling Aaron, go crazy and have fun building up some absolutely horrifying Borg ships. And I think he delivered, because like when I saw the draft and I saw some of these double digit numbers in scale and power and stuff, I was like, yeah, I don't think I'll ever use these in my game, because it would just terrify my players too much, and I wouldn't know what to do with them. But they look really cool on the page. So
I mean, the tactical cube alone. Let's go over this real quick, just so people can get so scared who play this game. The tactical cube has structure 18 and match that with the security 3, 21. That means they can't fail on a roll like that. And they have resistance 15. It's scale 13 and shields 26. That translates in technical terms to you're screwed. Do not mess with the Borg.
Pretty much. So, this is just a reminder, don't screw with the Borg. They're not here to, you don't whittle them down. You don't wear them down. You don't go to the next round of combat. You run far away.
I just can't take it. It's just so scary. All right, good. And then fortunately, they have engines 9 and con 3, which is a 12-point roll. So you probably do have a good chance of outrunning them. As long as as long as you don't roll any complications and your engines don't fail. So,
and that's what threat's for.
Oh, so frightening. Okay, we got to move on from the Borg ships.
Sure thing. Yeah, and then we had Borg ships, and then we added in Delta Quadrant ships. We got the Delta Flyer in there, Talaxian, Kazon, just everything you'd expect. Hirogen, however you pronounce it. Krenim, the warship, the time ship.
On there.
Stuff. Oh, stop there. Yep.
Yeah, because the Krenim warship, he did something very interesting in here. I don't know if you caught it before, but he puts in the timeline possibilities as if time is changing as you're reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you remember the Krenim from the show, they kept using this weapon and rewriting time. So I think that detail was just like so weirdly brilliant, and only from the mind of Aaron Paulier, right? So that was really cool at that point. Very nice. You even did an art brief with the temporal remnant on page 91, which was cool, with the hair, the lock of his wife, which was really cool. So again, small details. There's a lot of details like this wrapped in here. You even went into the species 8472 bioships.
Yep. Yeah. Well, got it. We had to touch on as much as we could in the space we had available. So threw them all in there.
Very good. All right. So now we end up in what always is my favorite chapter of all these quadrant books I've mentioned in the other ones, are the encounters and adversaries. Again, if you need ideas, one of my favorite ideas in this one is the demon doubles. And if anybody remembers, and there's even a picture of it in the art brief here, is there was a planet where they were touched by this metallic mercurial type liquid, and it duplicated the entire crew and ship of Voyager. It was one of the most tragic episodes ever. It was a two-parter spread over 2 seasons. So again, some really good prompts here that we could use, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Bunch of NPCs as always. Like we try to include a bunch of different NPCs in here, different levels, like not minor, notable, etc. To throw them in here. This first chunk of it, it's just I think Old Mage Kala is in here. For those of you who are fans of the Kazon, got a few Kazon in there. Pandari.
They just got so screwed by Seska. That's what I like.
The Phage folks, Vidians, Phages, those are fun. Some Voth, etc. And then we get into exploring Borg space. We bring in a bunch of Borg, running a Borg campaign. What to do if you want to assimilate your supporting cast. How to fight the Borg. Bring in some different types of liberated Borg. Yeah, we do have Hugh in here. Yeah, page 120, 125, 126 looks like. Yeah. We got Hugh in here. And this was before we even knew he was going to be in Picard. So it's just unexpectedly prophetic of us to drop that.
Well, now I got to look what he's on page 126 and his interesting. Okay. So his focus is, because we were just talking about this with Aaron during the Picard book last week. His focus and Patrick Goodman, Borg cybernetics and leadership, which later turns into hope, which we talked about last week. So that was pretty good.
Yep.
Very cool. Yep. I'm always looking at those focuses, you know me.
Yeah.
All right, what a book. And of course it closes with the Borg Queen and 132 about defeating the collective, some of the tactics that worked. So you could definitely have your players read up on that if they happen to come against the Borg.
Yep. And not that this is critical, but I think this is the longest of the Quadrant books. We just ended up with a few extra pages, and we were okay going a little bit over. So this ended up being, I think, 138 pages, I think, compared to the 120s and 128s of the other ones. But I mean, not that that's critical, but just a little sidebar Easter egg there for you. This is there's a lot of great content here, and I kept as much of it in as I could. Given the timing that we had. So, a lot of great stuff here.
Well, you know me, I can never get enough of the Delta Quadrant, so you could add 2 more pages and I'd be in it. So good job. We finished the Alpha, the Beta, the Gamma, the Delta Quadrant books. Just to remind everyone, they came out in 2018, 2019, early 2019, I think. And
I don't remember.
Yeah, they're still as relevant as ever. Again, they are, to me, I have a lot of the Star Trek guides, a lot of the support books, and these are the ultimate references for all of these regions of space. And I don't care what anyone says. I swear to you, the writers are using them. The writers have them tucked away in their drawer and they pull them out. The writers of all the new shows, because it's the quickest reference guide you could have. Points in the right direction.
Yeah, so, and they're still in print, and they're available in PDF. So even if you don't want the print copy, go grab the PDF and use it. Use the search engine. Use it as a function, as a resource. So good stuff.
Cool. All right. Shouts out. So we know we love our brick and mortars who are carrying these books, of course. So important to support them. So we're going to shout out today. Jay Benet says Games U in Gilbert, Arizona. So that's where we're going to go ahead and give our love to today. Who are you shouting out, Jim?
So I made an erroneous comment last week about Starfleet, or not Starfleet, Star Trek alumni who passed away. And I just want to shout out to DC Fontana and Renee Auberjonois, both who passed away while we were developing this book. So we want to make sure that we got their memoriams into the book. So thank you for all their service, for everything they've done, not just for Star Trek, but just across their careers, their illustrious careers. We want to make sure we remember them appropriately. So that's my shout outs for tonight.
That works. All right. So much fun and so much more to come. This ends our 35th episode.
Wow.
And, looking forward to so much more. And there's just so many goodies coming out from Star Trek Adventures.
Oh, yes.
Stay tuned to hear about those. All right. Until next time, IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. See you next time.